everything. You're throwing away everything.
My name is Margaret Davis. I'm 65 years old. I spent 4 decades working as a bookkeeper, pinching every penny, raising my only daughter after my husband passed away too early. I thought retirement would bring tranquility. I believed I had finally earned the right to exhale, to rest, to take one simple vacation just for myself. But the afternoon I returned home from that retirement getaway, pulling my small wheeled bag across the driveway I knew by heart, I discovered my entire existence waiting for me in black trash bags, arranged at the entrance like tombstones. Every bag stuffed with my clothing, my novels, the precious mementos that had defined a lifetime. And standing there at the end of the walkway was my daughter, Rachel. Beside her, her husband Derek, arms crossed, expression cold. Derek placed his hand on Rachel's shoulder. His voice was quiet but firm. "Tell her." Rachel swallowed hard. For a moment, I glimpsed hesitation. A shadow of the girl I once held in my arms during a thunderstorm when she was burning with fever. But then she looked away, avoiding my gaze, and spoke the words I will never forget. "Mom, I agree. You need to leave. You're retired now. It's time for you to go." That was it. No discussion, no warning, just a sentence delivered at the gate. I froze. The smile I had worn since boarding the final train of my journey slipped away. My body felt cold despite the warm afternoon sun. I looked down, and in one of the bags, something had spilled out. A cardigan. The burgundy wool cardigan I had knitted for Rachel during her first year at university. I remembered every loop, every evening at the kitchen table with my weary hands working the needles while she studied. Rachel saw it too. Her eyes lingered on it for just a moment. I thought perhaps she might step forward, retrieve it, say she was sorry. But she turned away. She averted her face from me. I bent down slowly, picked up the cardigan, and pressed it against my chest. Then, from another bag, I saw fragments of ceramic glinting in the sunlight. I reached inside and found what remained of my husband's old mug, the forest green one he used every morning until the illness took him from us. Shattered, broken, discarded like nothing. I wrapped the pieces in a tissue and held them as if I were holding him again. Not a word escaped my lips, not a single plea. Instead, I opened the trunk of my car and began lifting each trash bag one by one. My body shook, not from frailty, but from the weight of betrayal, pressing down harder than any load of fabric or paper. Derek whispered something to Rachel, smirking as if triumph belonged to him. Rachel did not look at me again. When the last bag was inside, I stood there with the cardigan in one hand, the wrapped mug in the other. My daughter had just told me I was no longer welcome in the very house I had kept alive for decades. And yet I smiled, a thin, bitter smile that tasted of ash. "Fine," I said softly. That single word carried the heaviness of 30 years and the release of 30 years as well. I slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, and started the engine. No one helped, no one waved goodbye. The tires rolled across the pavement, crunching against the gravel. I did not look back at the gate. I left my house, my daughter, and the life I had built behind me. That is how my story begins. I found my belongings in trash bags at the gate. My daughter stood there with her husband telling me, "You're retired, get out now." And I smiled, got in my car, and drove away. 6 months later, that same daughter would send me 87 desperate messages. "My name is Margaret Davis. I was 33 when the world cracked down the middle. Cancer took my husband in a winter that made every breath feel borrowed. I packed his desk with shaking hands and carried home one thing that felt like a beacon in darkness. His forest green mug with a small chip on the rim where his wedding ring always tapped. I washed it the next morning and the next. I dried it with the good towel and placed it by the stove like a promise. Some women light candles. I polished ceramic and memory. Work did not pause for grief. I kept the clinic books by day and balanced accounts for a corner shop by night. 2 jobs kept the lights on, the mortgage current, and Rachel's shoes intact. I learned the smell of toner and burnt coffee, the hum of lights that made midnight feel like noon. When the clinic reduced hours, I added weekend tax preparation and library classes to learn new software. Numbers were reliable. They did not argue, and they balanced when I told the truth. Rachel was 7 then, all knees and questions. She loved unicorns and hallway races. She called the hallway the racetrack, and I became the audience. On good nights, we spread library books on the couch, and she slept on my shoulder. On most nights, I folded laundry by the glow of the oven light to keep the bill down. I kept 3 jars on the refrigerator: coins, repairs, and hope. The hope jar held a note that said, "Keep moving." Grief was not a single storm. It was weather that changed without warning. Some days, it felt like drowsiness. Some days, it was mist that made me forget what I went to the pantry to find. I carried grief in one hand, numbers in the other, and Rachel on my hip until she grew too tall for my arms. People called me resilient. I nodded because rent does not pause for tears, and children do not sleep better when a mother falls apart. Resilience for me meant packing lunches and paying bills on time. One night, the rain came sideways off the lake, a wind that turned streets into silver ribbons. Rachel woke burning hot, skin bright, and eyes wild. The clinic was closed. I stood at the window, weighing taxis I could not afford, against the urgent care across the boulevard that had not processed our new insurance. The only sound I could name was the rattle in my girl's breath, a small engine missing every other beat. I put on my husband's heavy coat and lifted Rachel onto my back. She wrapped her arms around my neck, too proud to cry, too sick to speak. We stepped into the rain and kept stepping, block after block, past the laundromat and the card shop where she used to press her nose to the glass. The crosswalk light denied us. I looked both ways and ran. My shoes filled with water. My hair stuck to my face. My mouth kept saying, "It's okay," while my legs kept telling the lie. The nurse at urgent care did not ask for a card first. She swabbed her throat, took her temperature, and told me to breathe. "Strep," she said, pointing to the crimson line on the test strip. A doctor with gentle eyes wrote the prescription and said the words "Mother's Need" at 2 a.m. You did the right thing. I sat in a plastic chair, shaking from cold and relief, while Rachel slept against my shoulder. The coat dripped on the linoleum. My hands would not stop trembling until I touched her forehead and felt it cooler. We came home through gentler rain. I tucked Rachel into bed and stood at the sink, washing the forest green mug while the sky paled. I knew then that some rituals are not superstition. They are carpentry for the soul. Every morning after, I washed that mug and wiped the chip where his ring had tapped. I lined it on the shelf by the salt. Same spot, same distance from the stove, like a compass set to north. When the map in your head keeps sliding, ritual holds you steady. Years stacked up like file boxes. I learned which clients would pay late and which could not pay at all. I learned how to unjam a copier with a knife and how to stretch chicken into soup that lasted 3 days. I kept a ledger for the house and a ledger for my heart. Income, expense, hours gained, hours lost. I am not telling this to earn sympathy. I am telling it because the story of my leaving begins with the truth that I stayed, that I held the roof with ordinary choices repeated until they hardened into habit. Rachel grew tall and busy. She played soccer and broke one window. She hated broccoli and loved pancakes shaped like letters. On her 9th birthday, I poured hot chocolate into the forest green mug and set it across from her plate, a place for a man who was gone but not erased. She asked if her father could hear us. I said yes, though I did not know the rules of heaven. Faith for me was rinsing ceramic under warm water and choosing again and again to keep going. The night before my trip, I prepared a simple dinner: roasted chicken, green beans with butter, and cornbread. I set 3 plates and arranged the silverware I always use. Rachel texted that they were 10 minutes away. Derek sent a thumbs up. I wanted an ordinary evening, a blessing before the train carried me across the map I had studied for weeks. They arrived with a gust of May air. Rachel kissed my cheek without really connecting. Derek straightened a picture that did not need straightening and glanced at the brochures on the coffee table. A watch clicked when he moved. Saturday I asked about work. Rachel said fine. Derek said busy. A client in construction. Lots of contracts moving. A buyer's market if people knew when to act. I brought the chicken. He complimented the seasoning, then questioned the salt. I passed the beans and maintained my smile. Rachel kept her phone face down at first and then turned it when it buzzed. Blue light danced across her face. I watched her plate. 3 bites of chicken. None of the beans. I asked about the weekend. She said they might repaint the guest room. Derek said the paint was already in the basement. A fresh coat helps a space breathe. Your trip, he said after a sip of water. You must be thrilled. Trains are very meditative. Slow travel. His smile was careful. It's courageous to travel alone at your age. I'm not courageous, I said. I'm determined. Determination moves slower than courage, but it reaches the destination just the same. He laughed. Rachel did too after a pause. The phone buzzed again. She turned it face down. We ate in a hush that was not silence. Utensils brushing ceramic, the refrigerator's soft hum. I reached for the forest green mug and stopped. At dinner, it did not belong on the table. It sat on its shelf by the stove, chipped rim catching the light. I knew where it was without looking. The market really is solid, Derek said, cutting a bean. Empty nesters who downsize now come out ahead. Less upkeep, more liquidity. It's just economics. I've always appreciated economics, I said. It shows its work. Exactly, he said, and security. Houses are a lot to handle. Have you considered a retirement community, a facility? Wonderful places with transportation and programs. No ladders, no gutters, no snow. The air shifted. If emotions had temperature, the room dropped 3 degrees. I buttered a piece of cornbread and placed it on my plate. Rachel took a breath as if to interrupt, then released it and reached for her phone. I looked at her hands. They were her father's hands. Longer at the knuckles, a small scar near the thumb from the broken window when she was 13. I have considered, I said, not decided. She nodded, as if we had reached agreement. Her watch clicked. Well, we worry. It would give everyone peace of mind. Peace of mind belongs to whoever is paying for it, I said, not unkindly. Rachel cleared her throat. Derek just means possibilities, she said. It's good to have possibilities. Possibilities, I repeated. I will consider them after my trip. Derek leaned back, arms folding like a closing book. Of course. And if you want recommendations, I work with a seniors group. I have pamphlets. I'm familiar with pamphlets, I said. They don't always tell the part after page 5. He let the comment pass. Rachel checked a message and smiled at something that did not live at my table. I saw the dining room as a photograph I could not retake. 3 people arranged politely together and apart. We finished the chicken. I packed leftovers in containers. After dishes, Derek measured the hallway with his eyes. He asked about square footage, as if rehearsing a script. Rachel stood beside the bookcase that still held her trophies. Her finger traced the dust around the bases where I had not moved them. Do you still use the basement? He asked too casually. For Christmas, I said. And storage, he nodded. Just wondering. We said our goodbyes on the porch. Derek hugged with his shoulders. Rachel's hug was warmer but brief. Text when you board, she said. I promised I would. When the door closed, I washed the plates in hot water until the ceramic gleamed. I rinsed the forest green mug last. It was not dirty, but ritual is not about dirt. I dried the chip with a good towel and set the mug by the stove. Handle turned left like a compass. I told myself they were being cautious. I told myself worry sounds harsh when it tries to help. Tomorrow I would ride a train through the valleys and over the mountains. Tomorrow the windows would turn the country into a slow ribbon. I looked around the room, everything in its place, everything labeled by habit. In books, they call it foreshadowing. In real life, it is a prickle at the back of the neck. I turned off the light. The mug caught a sliver of street lamp and held it like a promise. I went to bed believing in kindness. I would not learn until I returned that kindness was not what waited for me at the gate. The train left Denver in the cool gray of morning, wheels humming like a lullaby stretched across steel. I sat by the window with a paper cup of coffee and my small suitcase overhead. For the first time in years, I was not rushing to balance ledgers or answer calls. The landscape unrolled. Endless fields like quilt squares, barns leaning under their own weight, cattle dots moving slow. I told myself this was my retirement gift to me, a ribbon of track across the country. In the dining car, I sat with strangers who spoke about grandchildren and gardens. A woman in a baseball cap asked if I was traveling to visit family. I said, "No, just traveling to visit myself." They laughed politely, but I meant it. When pie came, blueberry, warm, with a scoop of melting vanilla, I ordered a slice for myself. For decades, I had cut pie in halves, in quarters, in sixths, always giving Rachel the largest slice. That morning, with the Arkansas River sliding under the bridge, I ate a whole piece alone. It tasted of cinnamon and freedom, with a bite of guilt at the edges. In Salt Lake City, I stepped onto the platform and felt the thin air pinch my lungs. The mountains rose like a wall of bone and snow, older than any grief. I asked a fellow passenger to take a picture of me with the peaks. It was the first time I had asked someone to capture me, not just the scenery. My hair was silver in the sunlight, my smile hesitant, but real. Later, in the quiet of my sleeper, I turned the photo on my phone again and again, as if proof that I existed outside of giving. At night, the train's whistle stretched over the dark plains. I took out a notepad and began a letter I would never send. "My darling," I wrote to my late husband. "Today I ate pie alone. Today I let the mountains frame me. Today I felt time as a gift, not a debt. Rachel is grown now. I hope she has found steadiness, though she seems pulled by tides not her own. I want to believe when I return, we will sit again as mother and daughter, not as duty and burden. If you were here, you would remind me to hold hope the way you held my hand, crossing every street." I folded the page and tucked it into the back of my book, as though silence was safer than postage. The train curved through canyons the color of rust and flame. I pressed my forehead to the glass, watching the Colorado River keep pace beside us, restless and sure. In Nevada, vineyards stretched under the sun, neat lines of vines like scripture written on the land. I promised myself I would bring lavender from the station market home for the kitchen, a new scent to welcome a new chapter. All along the trip, I rehearsed the reunion. I imagined Rachel standing on the porch, Derek beside her, both smiling in relief that I had returned safe. I saw us at the table again, maybe awkward at first, but softened by my stories of the mountains, the coast, the strangers I had met. In my dream, Derek would see me not as an obligation, but as a woman, still alive with wonder. Rachel would remember the nights I carried her in storms, the mornings I ironed her uniforms. We would sit and share a pot of coffee, my forest green mug at its place, not as relic, but as vessel for tomorrow. The final stretch into San Francisco was gilded by fog lifting from the bay. The bridge appeared like a gate to another life. I walked the piers, tasted sourdough, watched sea lions tumble like performers. I let myself laugh aloud, the sound strange to my own ears. A woman at a cafe said she liked my jacket. I thanked her, and for a moment I felt both young and old, rooted and free. Days passed like gifts unwrapped slowly. Each night, I wrote in the notepad. Small lines of gratitude for pie, for mountains, for fog, for strangers' kindness. I did not know that each word was a shield, softening the blow that waited. When the train turned east again, I felt anticipation bloom in my chest. Home, I thought. I carried postcards, lavender, the folded letter, and hope stitched into every pocket. I pictured Rachel meeting me at the station, her eyes bright, her arms open. Perhaps Derek would have softened. Perhaps he would admit he worried too much. I imagined unlocking the front door and placing the lavender by the window, the forest green mug catching its scent. Instead, when the taxi pulled to my curb, I saw black bags piled high, a barricade of plastic swelling with the weight of a life. Rachel stood at the gate with Derek beside her, her hand pressing his arm as if to steady him or push him. The reunion I dreamed dissolved in the afternoon light. I looked at the bags and saw not garbage, but years. Photo albums, linens, cardigans, echoes. I saw Rachel's face, pale with resolve, Derek's with victory. I saw the forest green mug somewhere in the dark plastic, waiting for my hand. And in that moment, as the driver carried my suitcase to the ground, I knew this was not a return. It was an unspoken eviction. Family became frontier. Blood became border. I understood then that the journey I had thought was ending was only beginning, and the price of dignity would be counted, not in tickets, but in silence. I drove without music. The road a gray ribbon unspooling while my mind stayed at the gate. The trunk thumped when the plastic bags shifted. That rhythm kept time with shock. Breathe, I told myself. Keep the car between the lines. Go to the one address where someone still says your name. Helen's street waited under maple trees. I parked before her red brick house and watched the porch light hold steady like a small promise. She opened the door before I knocked. Helen's arms came around me without questions. Her hug said what language could not. "Kettle's on," she said. The living room held steady. We moved to the kitchen. She set out 2 white mugs with blue stripes and rinsed them with hot water first. She knows my habits from years of closing books together. The kettle sang. Steam lifted. She poured and slid a mug toward me. Tea is a small thing, but that night it felt like a rope thrown from shore. "I brought everything," I said. "They packed my life into bags." My voice sounded like it had walked a long way and was catching up. Helen did not perform shock. She narrowed her eyes the way she does when a column will not add. "Tonight you sleep," she said. "Tomorrow we sort. Lists first, calls second." I began to apologize for arriving unannounced and for the mess in my trunk. She shook her head. She set a plate of ginger cookies between us. Hospitality in her house is muscle memory. No preface, no fuss. I lifted the cup. The first swallow steadied my hands, and with it came the picture I did not invite. My husband's forest green mug found in shards and wrapped in a tissue in my purse. In one house, memory was thrown away. Here, comfort was prepared and handed to me with 2 hands. We carried bags in from the car. Helen took the lighter ones and argued for the heavier. I let her win because some victories are medicine. We stacked them along the wall of her guest room, a square space with a narrow bed and a lamp that throws a forgiving circle of light. She did not say, "Stay as long as you need." She behaved as if it were already decided. Back at the table, we made a plan. It was not a battle map, but it had steps. Sleep. Call my late husband's attorney in the morning. Photograph every bag and make an inventory. Pull out documents first. Keep the cardigan with me. Place the wrapped mug high on the pantry shelf. Helen's handwriting marched down a yellow pad, neat as a ledger. When I wavered, she pressed the pad toward me and said, "Paper is a bridge. We cross on paper." We covered practicalities, the spare key, the parking pass, the hall closet for my coat. We did not linger on Rachel. When I said her name, my throat tightened and words went sideways. Helen reached across and placed her warm hand over mine, not to hush me, only to anchor me. Later, she said, tonight is for tea and breathing. Tomorrow is for phone calls. After dishes, I stood at her sink and washed the mugs. I dried the cups with her towel and set them upside down. The simple work brought my breath back. I thought of how many nights I had rinsed the forest green mug after long days. How ritual tells the body to continue when the heart wants to fold. In the guest room, I opened one bag. The burgundy cardigan lay near the top, faint with cedar. I folded it and placed it at the foot of the bed. A small flag for tomorrow. Another bag held frames wrapped in newspaper. Rachel at 9, with sand in her hair. My husband grinning beside us, the three of us ringed by sun. I lined the frames along the windowsill and unwrapped the mug shards, setting the largest pieces together without glue. The seams sketched lightning across ceramic. Helen knocked and slid the door open with easy courtesy. "Extra blanket is in the closet," she said. "There's more tea if you wake." She squeezed my shoulder and left the door open an inch. That sliver of hallway light worked like a nightlight I had not known I wanted. I laid down without changing and listened to the house breathe. Floors spoke. The heater sighed. A neighbor's dog barked once and stopped. The metronome inside me slowed. I promised I would not disappear into rage. I would begin with paper, with names, with tea. The mug on Helen's counter would still be warm when I rose. That is what a friend can do in one evening. The guest room was square and quiet, but it felt crowded with the bags that lined the wall. Black plastic bulged like swollen shadows, each one tied tight, each one holding fragments of me. My entire life reduced to sacks that once held garden leaves. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed, staring at them, my stomach tight. I had carried those bags through the doorway of a friend, but in truth, I carried shame through the doorway of my own heart. I told myself to breathe, but each breath came jagged. A sentence formed inside me and would not let go. I was the foundation. Now, I am the discard. Years of double shifts, taxes paid on time, neighbors greeted politely, meals placed on the table. Foundation. Now, in the eyes of my only daughter, I had crossed some invisible threshold into waste. The word trash kept circling like a crow. I pressed my palms into the blanket and reminded myself I was still flesh, still breath, still more than bags. But the humiliation was raw. To be sent away is one wound. To see your life heaped in garbage sacks is another deeper cut. I had kept a home. I had scrubbed floors with vinegar and lemon to save pennies. I had balanced ledgers at night when my eyes blurred. Yet here I was, balancing the weight of disgrace. The lamp on the nightstand threw a cone of light that stopped short of the ceiling. Around the room, shadows bent across the bags. They looked like silent witnesses, like jurors deciding if I deserved to stay. My hands itched to rip them open, to rescue my cardigans, my cookbooks, the quilt stitched by my mother. But I was too tired, too hollow. Instead, I sat and let the tears fall hot on my hands. I cried silently, careful not to let Helen hear. When I could not stand the pressure of the room, I rose. The floor creaked under my steps. I crossed to the window and unlocked the latch. Cold night air rushed in, sharp with the scent of rain on asphalt. Outside, the streetlight buzzed, and a car hummed past, taillights red as embers. I leaned into the chill. It was my threshold moment. One door had closed with the slam of betrayal. Another opened with a view of resilience. I whispered into the dark, not for anyone to hear, but because the words needed form. "My daughter, I will not break." The sentence lifted into the night like a prayer without a steeple. I pressed my fingers to the sill, grounding myself. The city kept moving beyond my small sorrow. Porch lights flickered on down the block. Somewhere, someone's radio played faint jazz music. Life was indifferent but alive, and I chose to remain part of it. I shut the window, but left the curtain open. I needed that slice of streetlight to remind me I was not sealed in plastic, not buried. I returned to the bed and pulled the cardigan, burgundy, faint with cedar, onto my lap. It smelled like closets in winters when Rachel was small. I held it as though it could anchor me. "You are not trash," I told the cardigan. And in truth, I was telling myself. Sleep did not come quickly. Shame does not release a body easily. Yet slowly, in the silence, my humiliation began to harden into something else. The bags against the wall no longer looked like verdicts, but like raw material. If I was once foundation, perhaps I could be again. I closed my eyes with that thought. Tomorrow would bring paper, lists, phone calls. Tonight brought one vow. I would not let their verdict define me. I drifted into restless dreams. But one sentence followed me into sleep. I said it once more quietly to the room, to the night, to the memory of my husband, to the God I could not name. I will not break. I woke the next morning with swollen eyes and a stiff back, but with a determination that hummed low like a motor warming in the cold. I made tea in Helen's kitchen, studying my hands on the warm ceramic cup. I told her I needed to make an appointment, not with a doctor or a counselor, but with a lawyer. She didn't question me. She simply wrote down a name and number. I already knew William Foster, the man who had handled my husband's estate when he passed away 3 decades ago. Walking into his office was like stepping back in time. The walls smelled faintly of paper and leather, lined with photographs of William shaking hands with clients, diplomas in neat frames. His hair had thinned and gone silver, but his voice was the same, measured, deliberate. "Margaret," he said, standing with surprising warmth. "It's been too long. How are you managing?" I sat down, clutching my bag close, and told him everything. I didn't dress it up. I told him about the trash bags. I told him about my daughter's words, how she said, retirement meant exile. William listened with the patience of a man who had heard too many family betrayals, but never let them harden him. When I finished, he leaned back, fingertips pressed together, and said words I hadn't expected. "Margaret, you know your husband's will still stands. It left the house to you outright. Rachel had no authority to push you out. In fact, what they did could be considered unlawful eviction." I blinked, stunned. For years I had carried the home like a sacred space for my daughter. I had assumed without checking that by living there as family, everything was shared. But William slid a file across the desk. The faded signatures were still there. My husband's hand, my name, legal ownership that had never shifted. It was like hearing a buried song I thought I'd lost. I wasn't a guest in that house. I had been the rightful owner all along. Rachel's voice saying, "You need to leave," replayed in my mind, but now it sounded hollow, stripped of authority. William tapped the papers gently. "The law is clear. You still hold title. But if you want protection going forward, we should consider creating a trust. That way, your assets, retirement savings, pension, even this house, will be shielded. No one, not even your daughter, can use them or sign them away without your consent." I felt my spine straighten. This was what dignity looked like. Not loud arguments in the driveway, but ink on paper. Signatures no one could erase. I told him yes. I wanted a trust. I wanted clarity written in language no one could twist. He drafted quickly, walking me through each clause with patient precision. A revocable living trust. I would be trustee with the power to appoint a successor I trusted when the time came. My pension and savings would be retitled in the trust's name. The house, though bruised with betrayal, would be secured as well. And the beneficiaries. I paused long on that line. Rachel's name I did not write. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to exclude her. Instead, I thought of my nephew Thomas, who had sent me letters every Christmas. I wrote his name with steady hand. As the pen left the page, something shifted inside me, a reversal. I had arrived, feeling like refuse, the woman with her life in trash bags. I left carrying documents that affirmed my place, my agency. The reversal wasn't in shouting or confrontation. It was in silence, in the thick weight of legal paper in my hands. William shook my hand firmly. You have more strength than you realize, Margaret. This isn't revenge. It's protection. It's reclaiming what's yours. I walked out into the afternoon light, clutching the folder to my chest. The city looked different, less hostile, more navigable. I had lost a daughter's loyalty, but I had regained my own ground. This was the first brick in building something new. In the quiet of Helen's kitchen later, I spread the documents on the table. She poured tea into the same cup as the night before, steam rising. I touched the handle, remembering the broken coffee mug from my husband. That symbol of memory now paired with this symbol of law, past and present in conversation. I didn't need to tell Helen everything. She read it in my eyes. For the first time since the bags had been dumped at my feet, I felt the scales tilt back toward balance. My power had returned, not in noise, but in ink. And that night, when I lay down among the bags that held my past, I no longer saw them as trash. They were proof I had survived enough to need protecting. The first victory had been won. Not by raising my voice, but by writing my name. When the legal papers were tucked safely into a folder, I knew the next step was shelter. Helen told me I could stay as long as I wanted, but I needed a place that was mine. A door I could lock, and a window I could open without feeling like a guest. So, I began looking. At 65, I had not imagined I would be scanning classifieds for cheap rentals, circling ads with trembling fingers like a college student. The first place was a narrow room above a bakery. The landlord, a man with graying hair and a clipboard, barely glanced at me before asking, "Steady income? Any health issues? You live alone?" He asked the questions, like bullets fired in a row. I answered politely, but I could hear what lay beneath. He saw me as liability, not tenant. His eyes lingered too long on my gray hair, my small, hands folded in my lap. "We prefer younger tenants," he finally muttered. I left with my cheeks burning. The second place was in a complex near the freeway. Walls yellowed, air heavy with stale smoke. A younger woman showed me around, talking about security deposits and background checks, while her glance darted to the numbers I wrote on the form. When she asked for proof of triple the rent in savings, I folded the paper and slid it back. I realized then being older meant people measured you not by character but by statistics. But the third place, small, plain, sitting on the edge of the river, gave me pause. The building wasn't new, but it had wide windows, and from the kitchen you could glimpse the water glinting. The landlord, a soft-spoken woman named Rosa, walked me through. She didn't ask about my age. She asked about what kind of curtains I liked. She pointed to the lock on the door, saying, "It catches a bit, but I'll have it fixed before you move in." For the first time, I felt she was picturing me, not as a risk, but as a neighbor. I signed the papers with a hand steadier than I expected. Rosa pressed a set of keys into my palm. Thin, ordinary metal, cool against my skin. Yet to me, they weighed more than gold. Helen hugged me in the parking lot, whispering, "From trash bags to new keys. That's a story only you could write." The move itself became a montage of kindness. Helen arrived with her sedan filled with folded chairs and pots. 2 old co-workers showed up carrying a donated lamp and a second-hand coffee table. We carried the bags that once marked my humiliation up narrow stairs. But this time each bag felt lighter, transformed into pieces of a new beginning. In the living room, we placed a worn sofa against the wall, its fabric faded but clean. A bookshelf leaned slightly to one side, waiting to be filled. I set my husband's cracked mug on the shelf beside the new folder of legal documents, old and new, wound and remedy, side by side. When the box was set down, Helen jingled the keys I now held and smiled wide. "You're not a guest anymore, Margaret. This is yours." That night, after everyone left, I walked barefoot across the small apartment. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint. Outside, the river carried moonlight like silver threads. I turned the key in the lock, heard the click, and felt a current run through me. The trash bags had been my exile. The keys were my return. As I pulled a blanket over my shoulders and sat by the window, I whispered the words I had carried since that first night of betrayal. I will not break. But this time they sounded less like a prayer and more like a promise. I was no longer the woman discarded at the gate. I was the woman who had turned trash into foundation, who had walked out carrying bags, but now closed the door on a home built by choice. The motif was written in steel and silence. Trash bags to new keys. And with that, I slept. Not heavily, not yet, but peacefully enough to know I had started to build again. The first week in my little apartment by the river, I realized how much of my life had been built around others. For decades, I had poured myself into Rachel, into work, into keeping a roof over our heads. Now, the roof was mine alone. And the silence asked me a question I had never learned to answer. How do I stand on my own for myself? Not as a mother, not as a provider, but simply as Margaret. The faucet in the kitchen dripped steadily, an annoying rhythm in the quiet nights. In the past, I would have called a handyman or asked Rachel to take a look. But now, with only me here, I went to the hardware store, bought a wrench, and studied a video on my phone. My hands trembled as I fit the tool into place. A twist, a scrape, a grunt. Suddenly, silence. No more dripping. I laughed, not because it was impressive, but because it was mine. A tiny victory sealed in metal. Grocery shopping became a lesson in patience. For years, I bought in bulk, feeding a household, planning meals around a daughter's appetite. Now I learned to walk past the family-sized cereal boxes to choose a single loaf of bread, a small carton of milk. I kept a notebook of expenses, marking each receipt carefully. For the first time, I was not stretching every dollar to feed others. I was choosing what nourished me. There was a kind of dignity in that restraint, a rediscovery of self hidden inside the mundane. One evening, after a long day of arranging shelves and balancing my checkbook, I passed the bakery on the corner. Through the glass, I saw a pie, cherry, glossy with glaze, the kind I had baked countless times for holidays. My instinct was to imagine a table, family gathered, plates lined up, but there was no gathering waiting at home. There was only me. I hesitated, then walked inside and bought one slice. At home, I set the slice on a plate, carried it out to the balcony, and sat under the fading light. The river below caught streaks of pink from the sunset. I picked up the fork, took a bite, and let the sweetness settle on my tongue. My voice broke into the silence, a whisper both strange and tender. For the first time, I eat for myself. The pie was not extravagant. The balcony was small. But in that moment, I felt more human than I had in years. No one needed me to serve them. No one judged what I chose. It was just me breathing, savoring, alive. I began keeping a small list on the refrigerator titled, Things I Can Do: Fix a faucet, balance a budget, buy my own pie. Each line was proof that I was not discarded, not useless. Each act was a stitch in the fabric of a new identity. Sometimes, late at night, I still felt the echo of humiliation, the memory of trash bags at the gate. But when I looked at the keys hanging by the door, when I tasted the quiet victory of doing things for myself, I knew the story was turning. I was learning to stand again. Not loudly, not with fanfare, but steadily, like roots finding soil after being torn out. My life was no longer about what had been taken from me. It was about what I was quietly reclaiming. 6 months passed, and I had begun to settle into a rhythm of quiet independence. My mornings started with tea instead of rushing through coffee. My evenings ended with the sound of the river outside my window instead of the muffled arguments from Rachel and Derek's living room. I had keys on my table, not trash bags at my feet. I thought perhaps the worst was behind me. Then one Saturday morning, as sunlight crept across the curtains, my phone began to buzz. At first, I ignored it, but it buzzed again and again, relentless. When I finally picked it up, my screen was flooded with notifications. 87 messages, all from Rachel. My hand trembled as I scrolled. The first few were frantic. "Mom, please answer me." Then sharper, "I need you right now. Everything's falling apart." Then a flood of desperation. Derek left. He took the kids. I lost all the money. Crypto crashed. The accounts are empty. I don't know what to do. "I need you. Please, Mom." I sat down heavily in the chair by the window. 87 messages. Her words were messy, rushed, filled with typos, as if typed through tears. I could almost hear her voice. That same voice that once begged for medicine when she was small. The same voice that told me to leave my own home. My fingers hovered over the screen. A part of me, the part that carried her through fevers, that held her hand on the first day of school, that remembered the weight of her head resting on my shoulder, ached to answer, to say, "I'm here. You'll be all right. We'll fix this." That part of me had been the foundation of my life for decades. But another part, one I had been carefully nurturing these past months, resisted. It whispered, "She left you with trash bags at the gate. She told you to go. She chose her husband's voice over yours. Do not forget." I closed my eyes, and the images flickered in my mind. The sound of Derek's cold command. Not think, but must. Rachel's head bowed, then her quiet betrayal. "Mom, I agree. You have to leave." The crack of my husband's mug breaking against the pavement as it fell out of the trash bag. My hand trembling as I picked up the cardigan I had knitted for her years ago, treated like waste. Now, she was the one discarded. Derek gone. Her investments, illusions of wealth, evaporated. She was reaching for me the way a drowning person reaches for air. My heart ached. My pulse quickened. I placed the phone down, face down on the table. I rose, walked to the balcony, and let the cool wind steady me. The river below moved at its own pace, not rushing, not hesitating. I whispered into the air, more to myself than to anyone. What is the cost of forgiveness? What is the price of forgetting? The screen still glowed behind me. More messages kept coming, each more desperate. "Please, Mom. I'll do anything. I need you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Her words blurred in my vision as tears gathered. I pressed the heel of my hand to my chest, feeling the pounding of a heart that had been broken, stitched together, and broken again. For a long time, I simply stood there, torn between two lives. The mother who always rushed in to rescue, and the woman who had finally learned to protect herself. Which role would I choose now? I turned back toward the table. The phone lay silent for a moment, then buzzed again as if to demand my decision. I picked it up, unlocked it, and stared at the messages. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Just one word could undo months of rebuilding. Just one reply could pull me back into the storm. But I did not answer. Not yet. Instead, I locked the phone, set it aside, and wrapped my hands around a warm cup of tea. The ceramic did not tremble like my fingers. I lifted it, took a slow sip, and breathed. The taste was grounding, solid. Mine. 87 messages waited. They would wait longer. My heart whispered, "This time, you get to choose." And for the first time in a long time, I let the silence be my answer. I walked into the cafe on Elm Street with a calm steadiness, the same way I had taught myself to walk into each new chapter of my life these past months. The bell above the door chimed softly, and I inhaled the scent of roasted beans and buttered pastries. For a moment, I almost forgot why I was there. Then, my eyes found Rachel. She sat by the window, shoulders slumped, her frame thinner than I remembered. Her hair, once carefully styled, hung limp at odd angles. Her blouse looked wrinkled, as if pulled from a hamper instead of a closet. She wasn't scrolling her phone this time. She was staring into a paper cup, both hands wrapped around it, as if she needed the warmth to keep herself upright. I slid into the chair across from her. Neither of us spoke at first. I could see the weight of shame pressing down on her, the same way I had once carried the weight of bills, mortgages, and her childhood illnesses, without complaint. Finally, her voice broke the silence. It was low, ragged. "Mom, I messed up terribly. I had to sell the house quickly. I couldn't keep up with the payments. Derek," he left, took the kids, and moved back with his parents. The money I thought I had, it's all gone. Cryptocurrency. The stock tips I followed. It all collapsed. "I'm broke, Mom. I've got nothing left." She pressed her palms together, as though in prayer, and whispered, "I want to come back. I want to live with you." The words hung between us. I felt them in my chest, sharp and heavy, like stones sinking into water. My daughter, the girl I once carried through rain to a clinic, was now begging for a place to stay. I let the silence stretch. She shifted in her seat, fidgeted with the rim of her cup. My silence was not cruelty. It was the only way I could breathe. At last I spoke. My voice was calm, measured, but it carried the weight of everything I had endured. 6 months ago, Rachel, you stood at the gate with Derek and told me I had to leave. My life was placed beside trash bags, as though I were disposable. Her eyes dropped to the table. I saw her throat tighten, but I did not stop. Today, I will not do the same to you. I will not treat you as you treated me. But hear me clearly. I will also not allow history to repeat itself. She looked up, desperate, tears pricking her eyes. "Mom, please. I just need time, just until I get back on my feet." I reached into my bag and pulled out a plain envelope. I slid it across the table, my fingers brushing the worn wood as I let it go. Inside, there was no check, no key, only a neatly written list of affordable housing options I had gathered along with the name and number of a bankruptcy attorney who had once helped a colleague of mine. Rachel picked it up, confusion flickering across her face. She opened it, scanned the contents, and then looked at me with disbelief. "That's it? You won't help me." "I am helping you," I said gently, "but not in the way you imagine. This is your path, Rachel. You need to stand, to rebuild, to carry your own weight. I carried you long enough." Her face crumpled. "But I'm your daughter. And I am your mother," I answered, steady as stone. "That is why I refuse to let you drag me back into the wreckage. Love does not mean surrender. Love, real love, sometimes means letting you face the fire so you can learn to walk through it." We sat in silence again. Around us, the cafe buzzed with chatter and laughter, the world moving on without noticing the quiet battlefield at our table. Rachel folded the paper, hands trembling, and tucked it into her pocket. I reached for my cup of tea. Its warmth steadied me, just as it had on the first night I chose not to answer her desperate messages. I sipped slowly, then met her eyes. "This is not the end of us, Rachel. But it is a new beginning on new terms. You will stand on your own 2 feet, or you will not stand at all." She nodded faintly, though the fight had gone out of her. For the first time, I saw, not just my daughter, but a woman stripped of illusions, forced to confront the truth of her choices. I stood, placed a few bills on the table for my tea, and rested my hand on her shoulder. Light, brief, but certain. "You will find your way, but not in my home. Not this time." Then I walked out into the crisp air, my steps firm, the sound of the bell above the door marking the moment I left the old patterns behind for good. That day, for the first time in years, I felt the balance between us shift. Not cruelly, not vengefully, but with quiet justice. The mother who once carried her had finally set her down and let her walk. That night, I returned to my apartment by the river, the key cool and familiar in my hand. The evening air smelled faintly of rain, though no storm had fallen. Inside, the quiet was sharp. It wrapped around me as I set down my coat and placed the empty envelope that had held Rachel's new directions on the small table by the door. My body was steady, but my heart quaked. I moved to the desk in the corner, where a stack of blank paper waited. I had always kept it near, though rarely used it. Tonight, my hands reached for it without hesitation. I sat down, uncapped my pen, and began to write. Not to send, not to deliver, but to release. Rachel, I wrote, the letters clear, deliberate. A mother's handwriting softened by age, but not by weakness. I remember a night when you were 6. Rain poured from the sky, as if the heavens themselves were breaking. You burned with fever, and I carried you through the streets, my arms aching, my dress soaked through, my hair clinging to my face. I remember how small you were against me, your breath hot against my neck. I remember praying not for myself but for you. Every step I took was a promise that I would not let you fall. The pen trembled slightly as I paused. My eyes drifted to the small shelf where the forest green mug Saturday, its handle cracked but carefully glued back into place. That mug had belonged to your father. Each morning I had washed it, dried it, and set it out. Even after your father passed, I had treated it as though caring for it kept him with us. I bent closer to the paper and kept writing. Your father's mug has been my companion longer than you realize. It survived every move, every loss, every morning I woke before dawn to work 2 jobs so you could grow. I held on to it as if it were him, as if through it I could pour myself the strength I no longer had. And I kept it for you too, because I wanted you to remember that love is something poured out daily, not just spoken. My voice caught as the words filled the page. The sound in my head was like a whisper. If someone were listening, it would have been a voiceover, a mother's confession echoing through the dark. I continued. 6 months ago, you placed my life on the curb in trash bags. I watched as the mug I had cherished lay broken among old clothes and memories. You did not see me bend to pick it up, but I did. I carried it with me, wrapped it in cloth, and later glued it back together. It is not what it once was, Rachel, but it still holds, just as I still hold love for you. Tears blurred my vision, but my pen moved on. I cannot give you back the safety of childhood. I cannot carry you as I once did through the rain. You must carry yourself now, but I will never stop being your mother. My love remains, even if my home does not. I forgive you, Rachel. But forgiveness is not the same as surrender. You will build your own roof, your own table, your own mornings. That is how you will grow. That is how you will honor what I gave. I placed the pen down. The silence pressed closer, thick with the weight of what I had released. I folded the letter fully, pressing the creases flat, and slipped it into an old wooden box I kept beneath the desk. Inside already lay small relics of my life, photographs, the train ticket stubs from my retirement journey, and now this letter. Gently, I lifted the forest, green mug, and placed it inside the box as well. Its glued seam caught the lamplight, imperfect but whole, a symbol of both breakage and endurance. I closed the lid slowly, as if sealing both grief and hope inside. My heart felt heavy but lighter at once. This letter would never be mailed. Rachel would never read it, but it was not for her. It was for me, to put into words what had haunted me and to let the words rest in silence. I whispered into the room, my voice low but certain. I forgive you, my daughter, but I will not lose myself again. The weight shifted in my chest, and I felt something new. Not rage, not despair, but a quiet strength. I had chosen my boundary, clear as day. I would not cast her away as she had done to me, but I would not allow her to step over the line I had drawn. Forgiveness and protection could coexist. Love and distance could stand side by side. I moved to the window and opened it wide. The city lights shimmered against the river, each reflection breaking and reforming on the water's surface. I breathed in deeply, letting the night air wash over me. In that moment, I knew this was the pivot. This was where pain bent toward healing, where anger dissolved into resolve. Rachel's fate would be her own to shape. Mine, at last, was firmly in my own hands. I closed the window gently, turned off the lamp, and slipped into bed. My body relaxed into the quiet, my soul steadier than it had been in years. The letter, the mug, the memories, they would remain with me. But I, Margaret, would move forward unburdened.